So this is our kitchen, and as you can see, even with all the lights turned on, it's still very dark under the cabinets. The first thing I needed to do was search for an aluminum channel to use. I found this product from Uzada that worked out perfect for the install. It's as light as a feather and less than 5 millimeters in height, which is going to help me keep this as low profile as possible. Now another cool thing about these that isn't going to come into play here, but I did want to mention, is that you can bend and twist them and the diffuser will stay on. I'm not exactly sure how it works, but it is pretty cool and it opens up the possibilities for some unique projects down the road. And these channels are available in 3 different options: silver with white diffuser, black with white diffuser, and black with black diffuser. Next I had to pick out the lights. I ended up going with Cobb LED strips since I wanted something very bright and didn't want to have to deal with potentially having to inject power. These lights also have a CRI of above 90, which is really good. CRI stands for Color Rendering Index, and basically the higher the number the better. Here's a quick scan of underneath the cabinets. Now you can play around and test where you think it looks best to install, but I plan on putting a strip down the middle of each section. Now that I have a plan in place, I'm going to be measuring how long I need each aluminum profile to be. And even though it's not 100% necessary, I do recommend still using a channel, as it does help with heat dispersion, which will in turn make your lights last longer. To cut the aluminum down to size, I would recommend just using a hacksaw or a miter saw like I'm doing here. And to cut the thin plastic diffuser, my advice would be to just use a utility knife or scissors. And with everything now cut, I'm going to lay it all out to make sure the measurements are still lining up. For this step, I'll be taking the 5 meter Cobb LED strip and cutting it down to the size of each section of the diffuser channel. And if you've never cut these before, it's very easy to do. So obviously when we set everything up, we're going to have to somehow connect all the strips back together. I'm going to show you 2 different ways you can go about doing this. One way will be using easy plug and play connectors, and the other will be soldering. First, let's cut a strip at one of the cut points. And here's what one of these connector pieces look like. If you simply want to connect 2 strips together again, you insert each end and you will then press down on the silver clamps to hold them in place and to make a connection. But for what we're doing in this project, we're going to need to connect 2 strips together that will be separated by a variety of distances. For that, you'll still insert the clip into the end of your strip. Then you can insert the red and black wire into the clip and again push down on the silver clamps to secure and make the electrical connection. Now we can do the same thing for the other side. And when the clamps are successfully pushed down, they should pretty much be flush with the plastic. So it doesn't get much easier than that, but you may be thinking, what if I need to extend the length of the wires between sections longer than what's shown here? Fortunately, that's also super easy to do. Let's cut this setup right in the middle and use a wire stripper to strip all 4 ends. Next, just take some additional wires, and for reference, these are 18 gauge silicone wires, and cut them to whatever additional length is needed and strip all 4 ends. Now at this point, you could just twist the wires together and use some electrical tape and be done with it, but ever since I've started using Wago connectors at the recommendation of many people who watched some of my earlier projects, it's pretty much all I use now. So keep in mind that even though the middle section I added is only about 5 inches, it could very well be 1, 2, 3, 4 or more feet long depending on the distance needed to bridge. I'll quickly plug things in so you can see that everything is connected and working just fine with this method. So the other way to get things connected is by soldering, and that's the method that I ended up going with for this project. I first bought some 18 gauge silicone wires that I'll be using. I went with white because it's going to blend in best with the underside of the cabinets. I've already estimated the length of the wires I'm going to need between each section, and now I just have to attach them to the strips. I won't spend too much time on this, as I already made a very detailed and close-up soldering for beginners video that I highly recommend you watch that does a great job of showing all the simple techniques I'll be using here. Now the only downside of using the same color wires for everything is that you have to make sure you pay close attention to which one is your positive and negative so that you don't get them mixed up when connecting everything together near the end. Now just do the same for the rest of the strips. What you're looking at here is the beginning part of the strip. In my previous video, I went over 4 easy ways to control cob lights, and you'll see just how simple it is to use this piece to connect to different controllers. However, since I want this to blend in as much as possible to the cabinets, I'll be removing it and attaching the same white wires instead. One of my other goals is to do as minimal damage to the cabinets as possible, and even though these profiles come with your normal connector pieces that you screw in, since they are so light, I'm going to first try to see how things hold up just using some 3M double-sided poster strips. The next thing I'm going to do is secure all the aluminum channels to the underside of the cabinets. Now before putting the lights in, I'm going to use a small drill bit to make a hole where I can feed the wires through to connect the first strip to the second. You could very well just go down and around this section if you didn't want to make the hole, but I thought I'd give it a shot. Next, I'll be securing my first cob strip to the first section of cabinets. I'll then feed the wires at the end of this strip through the holes I just made. Next, I'll be laying down the second strip of lights to the second section of cabinets. And I know it's hard to see because my giant body's in the way, but I'm just using the Wago clips to connect the voltage wire at the end of the first strip to the voltage wire at the beginning of the second, and then doing the same for the negatives. So here I'm going to be drilling a hole into the cabinet above, and this is going to allow me to run the wires up and over towards the ceiling and then back down to the last 2 sections. Now I'll go over all the wiring at the end so you can get a better idea of everything going on, but for now I'm going to be drilling the last 2 holes for the end sections. Now I very well could try and find a neat way of attaching this to the underside, but since I'm trying to make this as clean of an install as possible, I'm going to try hiding it in the cabinet above. I ended up going with a 24 volt 3 amp power unit, and since I don't want to drill a massive hole in the bottom to fit the plug through, I'm going to be cutting the cord in half, drilling a small hole in the cabinet, and feeding it through the top shelf where I'll reattach with Wago clips. So once you cut the cord, just strip back the black casing, which will expose the 3 smaller wires, which are the positive, negative, and ground. Strip those wires on both sides, and you can then see how easy it is to reconnect everything using the connector pieces. Just make sure the color of the wires are matching. Next, we're going to pretty much do the same thing to the end of the power unit that would normally get plugged into the lights. I'm going to cut the barrel plug off, and inside the casing you'll find 2 wires that you can strip. These 2 wires are the positive and negative that will eventually get connected to our LED strip. And again, since I want the fewest noticeable wires under the cabinet, I'm going to be prepping 2 more white wires that I'll be connecting to this. We can now start getting things put back together. I'll be running the main power cord through the small hole I just drilled and up to the top shelf where I'll reconnect it using Wago clips. The only thing I'm going to be installing to control these LED lights is this really nice dimmer dial. Now if you perhaps just want a simple on-off switch, or maybe a motion sensor, Wi-Fi Bluetooth app, Alexa controlled, or any combination of these, you can watch the video I just made on different ways to control these cob LED strips where I go over in great detail how to set up these other options. So here's a close-up of the dial that I'll be using. On the left side is the input, which is where I'll connect my wires to the power supply unit, and the right is the output where the beginning wires of the LED strip will be secured. So at this point you can see I'm just finishing up connecting the wires from the LED strip to the dimmer dial. I'll be attaching this to the underside of the cabinet that's right above the light switch. I figured this would be the best place so we can use the switch to turn on the main lights and then quickly turn the dial to adjust the cob strips. Next, I'll be running the other 2 wires that are connected to the input side of the dimmer dial through the hole in the cabinet, which I'll then connect to the power. So for the final results, and feel free to keep watching after as I'll go over in more detail the wiring in the cabinets. But here's again what our kitchen looked like before with every possible light turned on, and now what it looks like with the new under cabinet lights installed. It really does make a huge difference, and I'm super happy that after everything's said and done, the only thing that's really visible no matter where you are in the kitchen is this one black power cord. The dimmer dial works great, and for sure something I'm glad I added. Next, I'll turn off all the lights so you can see what it looks like with just the Cobb LED strips on. And finally, some examples of how things look at night. And to wrap things up, for those of you who are wanting to see more of the wiring and how I hid things, I'll just pan through everything and hopefully you can get a good idea of what I did. To hide these bulkier wires inside the cabinets, I'm just going to use some basic track cable concealers. I'll maybe try doing something with the top section, but since it's so high, it's really not that visible if you have everything pushed back against the wall. And I'll come up with a different way to make this look a little bit neater, but for now I just tape the Wago connectors to the side, which is connecting the wires from my second LED strip on the other side of the sink to the third LED strip below. So that about wraps things up. I hope you enjoyed the video, and as always, let me know if you have any questions.